Hey everybody, welcome to Performance Anxiety on the Pantheon Podcast Network. I am your host, Mark, and before we get started, I want to thank our sponsor, AKG, for sending us their Podcaster Essentials kit. It comes with a Lyra mic and an incredible set of headphones. Astrid Young comes from a long line of creative people. Her father is legendary writer, journalist, and author Scott Young, and her brother's Neil Young. Those are some tough acts to follow. Astrid talks about growing up and getting into music in her own way, and she describes what it was like when Neil asked her to sing on Harvest Moon. There's some great stories about the Unplugged show and Road Rock, but she's also done a lot of cool work with Nancy Wilson, Heart, and her own solo work, which is clearly different from her brother's music. She's played metal, desert rock, folk, and some pretty wild alternative music. And she wrote and starred in a movie and wrote a biography, which she is considering expanding on with the help of her brothers. Her latest album features Victor De Lorenzo on drums and the Integratron. Definitely look into the album and the structure. Give her a follow on Instagram at WandaPlez to keep up with what she's up to. Follow us at PerformanceANX. Rate and review us because it helps us get in front of people. We accept coffee at ko-fi.com/performanceanxiety. Merch is at performanceanx.threadless.com. And now buckle up because there's a lot going on this one with Astrid Young on Performance Anxiety, part of the Pantheon Podcast Network.
Hi, I'm Astrid Young, and you're listening to Performance Anxiety. Okay, I don't know what else to say. Okay. Trying to get a little mood lighting happening, man. It was,
there we go.
Backfired.
Well, I've got this weird floating mic thing that it'll pop in and out of the meeting. So.
Is that what happens when you use the backgrounds?
Yeah. That's a photo I took a little while ago. So I figured, let me see if that'll work. And now it's doing weird things to everything else. This weird floating mic head randomly.
It's like magic.
It is weird, terrible magic. That's so. Oh, I can't stop doing that. It's so weird. How you doing?
I'm good.
Good.
A little tired and overworked, and I've got a million different projects going on right now. So
sounds like it.
Yeah, I mean, kind of story of my life. I just find it hard to say no to cool things. So.
Well, I'm glad you said yes to this. So must be it's cool.
Absolutely. Well, just the idea of performance anxiety is kind of it was intriguing to me. Let me put it that way.
Oh, good. It's it's funny because the show has morphed a lot since I started. I've got almost 200 episodes, and it started out with that being the subject, and I would just keep forgetting to ask people that. So it's kind of morphed into, instead of just focusing on performance anxiety, it's just kind of getting really cool stories of being an artist.
Well, yeah. I mean, and I don't think I don't really often get stage fright anymore, but there's a few notable situations that I've had that have been incredibly anxiety provoking. And, I don't think you can be an artist and not have at least a few of those in your career. I mean, if you haven't, then obviously you're probably still living in your mother's basement.
Yeah, exactly. I know I don't have anywhere near the career that you've had, or a lot of my guests have had. I was a photographer for a bunch of years, but I went to college for it. And taking my photos and bringing them into class was enough for me. I mean, because we would bring them up and then the entire class would critique them. And when I got up to school, and I was just not prepared for that. So
it's tough when all eyes are on you, and you feel like you got to do something. Like I didn't start performing solo until, I don't know, I guess probably in my 30s. And it's really hard, especially when you're the only person up there,
Yeah.
But I think it's a really good even if you never intend to do that regularly, if you play in a band or usually with a group of people, I think it's a good exercise for everybody to have, because once you've done that enough, you're just like, I don't think you'll ever be afraid to make a fool of yourself.
Oh, I know. I 100% agree. I did something similar to that. I did improv for a little bit.
Oh yeah.
And
cool.
So I went and I took a class in DC because I live in Virginia, and it was amazing. Once I didn't care about, sounding dumb or making a fool of myself on the stage, it changed a lot of things. Not just that, but in my whole life. Yeah. It was transformative. It was unbelievable.
It's interesting how that happens. You just get pushed. You get pushed to do things that you didn't even think that you were capable. Exactly. Wow, did I really just do that? Whoa.
Exactly. And
but especially when you're live, there's no take backs, right? So you just got to kind of roll with it. It's just like, oh yeah, I meant to do that.
Yeah. All part of the plan.
That's it.
Thank you so much for joining me. This is fantastic.
Okay. Do you, what network are you on?
Are
you on Spotify?
I'm on Spotify. I'm on like every major podcatcher there is. I'm part of the, with Long May You Young, we're part of the same podcast network, Pantheon Podcasts. We all go through the same network, and they throw the RSS feeds out, and they take care of all that for us. So it's
cool.
It's been really awesome. Really happy I joined that network. So a lot of cool shows. So what I like to do is to find out a little bit about your history to kind of find out how you got to where you are now. And your history is a little different than a lot of guests that I've had. So you come from an incredibly creative family, and a lot of people know that your brother's Neil and his entire catalog of work. But I don't think, unless they've really delved into Neil, they might not know about your dad and how creative he was and what he did. So he was a very well-known writer in Canada.
Yeah, correct. He was best known as a sports writer, actually. He's in the Hockey Hall of Fame.
Wow.
He is still considered by some to be the only hockey writer there was. He wrote for Associated Press. He wrote about 45 books, some of them bestsellers that were biographies of famous sports people. Like he wrote 2 books with Punch Imlach, who was the manager and coach of the Toronto Maple Leafs, and also one with God, I'm so bad. I'm not a sports fan, I mean, I grew up around this stuff, and honestly, he used to take me to the racetrack all the time, and that's really the only sport that I gravitated to was thoroughbred horse racing. Oh, but he was actually pretty high up in the thoroughbred horse racing circles too. He won the 2 highest awards in thoroughbred horse racing.
Oh wow!
For articles that he wrote on a jockey named Lafitte Pincay. So in the United States, it was the Eclipse Award, and in Canada, the equivalent of the Eclipse Award is the Sovereign Award, and he won both those awards. So
wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, so I mean, I became a pretty good handicapper by the time I was about 10 or 11 years old, but largely. In large part because of my father's sports career and, the company that he was keeping.
Yeah.
Sure. But yeah, no, he was on Hockey Night in Canada. He used to do the player interviews in between the periods, and he was on a lot of TV shows, or like not just sports shows, but like news shows. And he was the anchor on a late night news show back in the 70s on a Toronto radio or TV station.
Oh, cool.
Did a lot of radio. Yeah. And he was everywhere for a while. He was kind of a household name, and certainly guys my age and even a generation younger probably all read his books.
Right. Was he really into music, or your mom really into music?
Actually, my father would freely admit that he was the only one in the family that had no musical talent at all, which is why he became a writer. But My family, outside of my dad, my family's pretty musical. I mean, we all play. My uncle, could pretty much play anything on piano and had various instruments lying around his house. And, they'd get together and sing. My cousin, my uncle's daughter, was an opera singer.
Oh, wow.
My grandmother on my father's side was, she played piano and used to go and play at the Legion. And, she'd be up partying all night, playing piano and singing songs with people. And, that's just who she was. And I guess, so in a way, I guess that's, I come by it honestly.
Yeah.
But
when did it really start making an impact in your life? When did you start noticing music?
Well, I started playing music when they had me in music lessons when I was like a toddler. Wow. My parents did. So I could read music before I could actually read books. Wow. So it's always been part of my life. And I started playing piano when I was 6, and then I started playing wind instruments shortly after that. So I played flute. And then, but my main instrument was oboe and English horn through most of my early career. And I didn't really get into rock and roll until I was about 15.
Oh, man.
14.
So what was it that got you into rock? What album hit you?
Oh, Black Sabbath, actually, and I was so deep in the classical world too. And there was so much about Black Sabbath and Judas Priest too, that had like a lot of classical overtones to it. And it was just fascinating to me that even in the classical world, I was into heavier stuff like Stravinsky and Tchaikovsky and stuff like that. So kind of really, really heavy, bombastic, music. Yeah. And which was considered really revolutionary for its time. But so I don't really think that there's much of I don't think it's too different from where I went to. Of course, I like all kinds of music, but that's what really got me into rock and roll was heavy bands like that. I mean, before that, I used to think that most music with vocals was boring.
Oh, really?
I was much more into orchestral music and classical music and stuff like that. But
so when did you start singing? Since if you thought vocals were boring, when did the singing for you come in?
Yeah, the singing. I mean, I never even considered myself to be a singer until I moved to Los Angeles. And what happened there is, I went to kind of find my way in the music business. And, I'd had a couple of bands in Toronto that I was singing in, but I still really relied on the guitar. I felt really weird not having something like that, like, what do I do with my hands? What do I do? Where do I go?
Yeah.
At least with the guitar, you kind of know what's going on. But, when I got to Los Angeles, of course, I didn't have any gear. So I ended up in a heavy metal band called Sacred Child. And even though that was kind of a double-edged sword, but one thing almost right away I realized is like, if I'm just a singer, I don't have to carry any gear. I can just show up. This is great. I don't have to load and unload and worry about my crap at the end of the night and, make sure things are working and buying strings and that kind of crap. So it's like, I thought, hey, this is great.
There you go. See, if all the attention's on you on stage, that's a perk.
Yeah. Yeah. And, and eventually I brought some keyboards into the situation and started playing guitar again a few years later. But yeah, I didn't play for many, many years when I was in LA. So
was Sacred Child an existing band, or did you create that with the band members?
Oh God, no. I can't take responsibility for that. So I was in Los Angeles. I think I'd been there for about a month or so, maybe a little over a month. And I was staying with my friend Ellen, who I've known since I was a kid. And I had in LA, they have a music magazine called Music Connection that has free musician ads. And so I put an ad in Music Connection saying, singer, blah, blah, blah. I can't remember what I said. Anyway, got a bunch of calls, did a bunch of auditions. And this was one of the calls that I got was for this band, Sacred Child, and they were already signed, right? Okay. And what had happened is fired their singer, who was a guy, actually, a guy named David Reese, and they were looking to replace him. So the record had already been made, and then they fired the singer, and basically they needed to hire somebody to come in and recut all his tracks. So in I walk, and I got like hair out to here, and anyway, so I got the gig, which is kind of odd to me too. Well, it was really good in a lot of ways too, because where I came from, the market that I came from in Toronto, like everybody knew who I was, everybody knew who my family was, everybody knew what the association was and stuff like that. And I couldn't get arrested. I could get everybody in the music business down to see my shows, and they did not give a shit. I was like a novelty act. It didn't matter which way I tossed it up. Anyway, so when I went to LA, I was just like determined that I was just not going to tell anybody what was up.
Okay.
So I got this gig, and then, of course we started rehearsing, and then we went in the studio, and about 6 months after that, a Canadian magazine called Music Express actually did this big article on the band, and of course outed me. So the record company guy comes walking in with a copy of Music Express, saying, "What's this? Why didn't you tell me?" And I was just like, hey, I was just happy that you guys like me for me, Yeah. And maybe, in retrospect, it was the hair. But because to be honest, they weren't really interested in having a girl in the band, or at least, the record company guy was. He really liked me. And the guy he was the producer and also the rhythm guitar player and the primary writer in the band, he really wanted me in the band, but the rest of the guys weren't really keen on it. They tried hard, but in the end it was really tough, especially when The Truth came out. And then when we started getting press and stuff like that, it was all about me. And here's these guys who've had this band, and I can understand it to a certain degree. They worked really hard on this band and the record and stuff like that. And then I come in and pull the rug out from under them, which is not my intention, certainly.
Right. And,
I didn't write a lick of anything on that record. I can't take credit for any of that, and nor would I want to, actually. I actually hate the way I sound on the record, because they put me in, I was really green at the time too. And this just factors into the performance anxiety thing, because it was really difficult for me to go in and cut somebody else's tracks, and they were totally in the wrong key for me. And I was so green at the time that I really didn't have the balls to stand up and say, this is not the right key for me. But of course, also, we're not working in digital. We're working on 2-inch tape. So it would have been like, okay, we're not going to go back and re-record everything.
Yeah.
And you can't very speed it down, enough that it's going to make a difference or make it sound right. So I just kind of bit the bullet and I did it. And I actually ended up drinking a lot in the sessions too, because I was so freaked out. It's like, oh my God,
really?
I can't do this. Oh yeah. There's one of the songs, and this really performance anxiety is just I don't know what I'm doing. Why am I here, kind of thing. And this is beyond my capability. And so I would just get hammered, Wow. And there's just one song on the record that, you're doing kind of a scat ad lib on the outro and stuff like that. To this day, I listen to it and I can't tell what I said. What the thing? I have no idea. The crowd leads up to the management of Bobby. Look at this crowd. They're standing so far. And the music's all too loud in here. They're not saying. They're there to save our game. They got a real name. They're ready to party in the river. I have no idea.
Oh, man.
Yeah, I know, but it's amazing what you can get through. It was a really traumatic period in my life, wow, to believe it or not. But I'm really lucky that I had a really good publicist that talked me down off the ledge a few times. Not literally, but
right, yeah.
But he. I was freaking out, and I knew that I wasn't enjoying myself, and I was just I was almost like I was in jail or I was trapped or something. It's like, get me out of here.
Oh my gosh.
Do something else. And he'd be like, don't worry about it. Just, just roll with it. It's not going to last forever, and it's going to be good for your career. And, ultimately it was. We did a lot of stuff, and we were in a lot of big magazines. I mean, if you picked up a rock magazine in the late 80s, you could not pick up a rock magazine without seeing us in it.
Yeah.
So, I knew I had made it at that point when there was this an Italian language magazine called HM, and they had stickers in the middle, right, of singers. And there was one of me and one of Bon Jovi. And I was like,
oh, wow. That's awesome.
Yeah,
Man.
I know. It was great. So, there's good and bad of it, but I learned a lot. In retrospect, it was really an exercise in humility.
Yeah.
So
how long did
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, how long did the group stay together with you as part of it?
Well, we were working on a second album, and unfortunately, after the first record, the drummer quit, and the original bass player quit too. Now, the drummer, he just had another thing. He's a photographer too, and so he just wanted to focus on his photography. And so we got a new bass player. But we had a real hard time finding a drummer, and we went through a couple of drummers, and it was ridiculous. It was so hard in the studio, just trying to do tracks with these cats that were, nice guys, but it wasn't really cutting it. And I think in the end, Chuck Rosa, who was the producer, he was good friends with Eric Singer.
Oh, yeah.
He's been playing with Kiss for the past few. So Eric came in and cut a few tracks with us, but we never actually finished the whole record, and we were working on it for, I have to say, a good year.
Oh, wow.
And during that time, of course, I'm just doing my thing. I was at a party jamming with some friends of mine. I can't remember whose birthday party it was, but anyway, I got jumping up on stage and I was singing some AC/DC songs with this band, and Bill O'Coin was there, who was Kiss's manager at one time, and Billy Idol and whatnot. And Bill came up and he's like, I want to sign you. I want to put you in the studio, this, that, the other thing. You're amazing, blah, blah. So anyway, so he talked me into quitting Sacred Child, which, didn't really take much convincing, to be honest. But what ended up happening was, it was good and bad because, the thing with Bill never really went anywhere. Unfortunately, he had a drug problem and he kind of went off the rails in the middle of it. So he basically, what ended up happening is he put me in the studio with a bunch of cats, right? Like studio guys and whatnot. And so I ended up with a bunch of demos and no band and no manager. Wow. I mean, in the end, so here I am, high and dry. It's not like that's never happened to anybody. And to be honest, it's just like one thing in a long line of other things. I've never had good luck with management before. It's just like sometimes I don't know. I'm not convinced that I've never been lucky enough to have, like my brother was lucky enough to have a guy like Elliot Roberts on his side. I just never, I never found that person.
Yeah. A guy like Elliot Roberts is hard to find.
It really is. He was one of a kind for sure.
Yeah. When did you start writing your own music? Was it before Sacred Child or during, after?
Well, I've written plenty of music when I was a kid, but of course, most of it sucked. So you got to suck for a long time before you start getting halfway good.
Yeah, I'm still waiting for that to happen here. We'll see. Maybe.
The thing is, it's like with the classical background too, I got really hung up on the idea of perfection. And that, I think, really hindered my progress as a player and a songwriter, because I was reaching for this thing that just wasn't me and it wasn't attainable. I mean, I was looking at singers like Ian Gillan and Glenn Hughes and Robert Plant and stuff like that. And those were the singers that I wanted to be like, but my voice didn't sound like theirs.
Yeah.
Much to my chagrin, but
a lot of other people.
It wasn't until I started getting into artists like Kate Bush and Nina Hagen. Even she's a kind of a punk artist, but they have incredible voices. But they use their voice like an instrument, much more so than, they don't strive for perfection. And I also had like another really good friend of mine, Nancy Wilson from Heart. She told me one time, as we were talking about this, and she goes, it's the imperfections in your voice that make it unique. And that's what people gravitate to. She goes, what if everybody had like perfect voices? That would be really boring. And I thought about it. I thought, yeah, she's right. So
yeah, exactly.
From then on, I didn't give a shit.
So, all right. So I'm looking at a discography here, and I see Sacred Child in '86. And I'm also seeing it got re-released in '89. And then the next thing is Blackthorn in '94. Well, '92. All right. So I'm looking at this website here. And everything's a little out of order. So, all right. So 86 was Sacred Child, and then 92 you do background vocals with your brother on Harvest Moon. How did that come about? Did he call you up and say, hey, I want you on background vocals, or how did that transpire? Because I know my brother and I, it's kind of hard for us to say, hey, why don't you come in and help me out doing things?
It's well, it was certainly unexpected. I always share. I spent a lot of time in the studio, and I would always share what I'd done with my brother. And, of course, hoping for feedback, which sometimes I would get and sometimes I wouldn't. But I was actually just up for Thanksgiving one year, and we were sitting around after dinner, and he whips out his guitar and he says, oh, I've been in the studio lately, and I was wondering, what would you sing on this? If you were going to sing backup on this song, what would you sing? So it plays like War of Man, which is on Harvest Moon. And you could have knocked me over just like that. I was like, in my mind, the thoughts that are going through my mind is just like, oh my God, seriously? He's really asking me this? And, it's one thing to hang out with your family and stuff like that, but, it all gets really real. It's like he is who he is, right? So
right.
In that moment, he's not my brother anymore. He's like, oh, this guy is asking me to actually sing on a record, right?
Wow.
So now it's do or die. I've got to like pull this off. And I don't even remember what I did, but obviously it was enough. Yeah. Because he said, well, why don't you stick around a few extra days, and Nicolette's going to be here, and you guys can sing together.
No one wins. It's a war of man. No one wins. It's a war of man.
Wow.
And so that's how that happened. And that's the first time that I sang with him. And so I was in the studio singing with Nicolette. And it's really interesting because as long as, I've been practically living in a recording studio since I was, 14. And I've been around them all my life because they're totally different approaches to recording. Like I like, the kind of pristine, sterile studio environment.
Okay.
Punching in and comping and stuff like that. That's kind of what I'm used to, right? But he likes to do one take of everything, and he hardly ever does a second take. And I think I might have gotten a second take on some of the stuff that I did, but very few times. So I quickly learned that, okay, you got to make the first one good because it might be the last one you get.
Wow. Man, there's some performance anxiety right there.
No pressure. Yeah.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsors.
But, but there's something to that too, the more I when you're in the studio too, and I've spent enough hours in the studio to know that you can continue to hammer on a track or a part or something like that. And at some point, it's, the law of diminishing returns says that you just got to stop because it's not going to get any better. Right. It'll get better up to a point. And then like even last night I was in a studio doing a piano track, and And, I dicked around, did a couple of passes, and then I did one pass, punched one part in. It was perfect. And I'm listening to it. And I had this thought in my head, is just like, maybe I should just do another pass just for the hell of it. And then I talked myself out of it because I thought, no, I know what's going to happen. I'm going to go in to do another pass. It's not going to be perfect. I'm going to want to do it again. And we're going to be here for another 3 hours. Yeah. So it's just like, forget it.
Yep.
It's good.
Going down that rabbit hole.
Just bounce my tracks and let me be on my own. And honestly, it was beautiful. I laid it into my track today and I was like, oh, the sound was so perfect. It just almost made me weep. So.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Oh, man. I'm going to get to your new music here in a little bit, but the Unplugged album he did, that's one of my favorite. It is actually my favorite Unplugged performance of the whole MTV Unplugged genre. And I heard that was actually the second attempt at doing that.
Yeah. Mm.
So
true.
What happened? I think I heard that Neil was under the weather or something. They're having false start issues or something. Yeah,
he was. He wasn't feeling good. He actually almost I think he was feeling like he was getting a cold or something like that. And so he had actually canceled the gig, and we were like me, Nicolette, Tim Drummond. I think that's it. Anyway, the three of us, we were on our way to the airport in the limo, and then we got the call that the gig was off. So,
oh wow,
because Neil wasn't feeling well, so we decided to go to lunch since we had the car, and we were just pulling into the parking lot of the restaurant, and then we get the call, oh, the gig's back on, go to the airport. So we go to the airport, and I guess he rallied and got that together. But we did the sound check the night before, and it was fantastic. It sounded beautiful. I mean, Ed Sullivan Theater, just gorgeous. It really sounds great in there. But in the meantime, before, we couldn't leave our stuff set up because Katie Lang was coming in the next morning to do her Unplugged show. So we had to rip everything down. They had to rip the board down and all our settings and stuff like that. And it's never the same when you do that. I don't think anybody felt good about that. I mean, I was a little leery thinking, this just doesn't sound good. Anyway, so, and of course, with the theater full of people, it's going to sound different too. So when we started to play, I mean, it wasn't the same, and Neil wasn't feeling it. So he stopped and started songs quite a few times, and we eventually got through the show, but he wasn't happy with it. And it's not that it was terrible. I don't think by any stretch that it was awful, but and you probably know this for yourself too, if you don't feel good in the moment, you're never going to look at that show with any fondness. You're always going to go back to that moment and think the worst. Yep. And honestly, he hates looking at stuff like that. He doesn't want to listen to it. He didn't want anybody else to either. So he bought the show back from MTV, and we set up another one in Los Angeles, which was much better, but there was a lot of drama going on at that point. It was fun. And the performance anxiety continues because he changed the set list right before the show. Oh, wow. And suddenly there was 2 or 3 songs on the set that we'd never rehearsed that I didn't know, and also he had thrown Helpless in there too, which I'd never done with them before. But, it wasn't just that we were doing Helpless. It was me and Nicolette and him, and that's it. Oh, wait a minute. I think maybe Nils was playing some accordion on it or something like that.
On our own, leave us helpless, 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 helpless.
But that's it. It's this little ensemble, and it's talk about being put on the spot. Here you go.
Yeah.
And the other songs that I didn't know, Nicolette actually had to sing the part to me in my ear right before we were singing it. So if you actually watch Unplugged, And you'll see sometimes the camera cuts back to us and we'll be just like going back to our microphones, but that's what was happening. She would lean over and she would sing my part into my ear, and then we go back to our mics and we do it, right?
Wow.
And this happened like a couple of songs, I think. So
That's wild. And so I noticed that the show seemed to be split up into two sections. There was like the solo Neil section and then Neil with the band. Was that by design, right, or was it editing, or how did that come about?
No, that was the show. But the thing is, before we did the show, what was planned, it was supposed to be the whole band the whole way through, but that's what he did to change it. He, just like we get the set list and it's just like, okay, well, the band's not playing in the first half of the show at all. And then Helpless was the segue, and then the whole band came out, right?
Wow.
So that was a surprise, and Neil's like that too. I mean, he just, over the years that I spent singing with him and being on the road with him, you just kind of have to be ready for anything.
Wow. I imagine. And I would have, if it was me, I know my nerves would be up doing the second take of this show. You're on MTV, you're getting thrown songs that you're not familiar with, and then it's just four of you on stage. That's got to be nerve-wracking.
It's totally nerve-wracking, but you're there in front of, it's not like you can say, give me another go. Right. It's not like being in the studio. You've got people out there, and not only people, this is Los Angeles, you got to understand. So you've got half of the fucking music industry is there, right?
Right. every
big league guy in the music business was in that room that night, and the guys from REM were there, Peter Buck and Michael Stipe, and it was just, I can't even remember. The whole thing is a blur, actually. But, the other thing is, too, it's like when we were in the studio doing Harvest Moon, Linda Ronstadt did these long oohs as you know.
Yeah.
And if you didn't know, they are so ridiculously long that it's almost inhumanly possible. It's almost not possible to actually do it.
Wow.
For your typical singer anyway.
Right.
And when we were rehearsing and stuff like that, I was always like, I can't sing that note that long. And Nicolette's like, yes, you can. Yes, you can. Yes, you can. And like going over techniques and things like that and how to do it. And then actually doing it in the show at Unplugged and not knowing whether I would get through it or not. But the first time I did it, it's just like, no problem.
Wow.
And now I can hold a note for like, oh my God.
Okay, so that
you can go away and have a bite and come back, and I'd still be on that note,
I wanna see you dance again, because I'm still in love with you on this harvest moon.
So that reminds me, I wanted to ask, were you familiar with everybody in the band? Because it was Harvest Moon was basically most of the Stray Gators, and then Linda Ronstadt, James Taylor. Did you know everybody, or were you kind of having to get familiar with everybody during the recording sessions?
Well, most of them I knew or had met at least a few times growing up. A lot of those people have been in Neil's life right from the beginning. Ben Keith and Spooner was new. He didn't. That's the first time that I had ever met him was on Unplugged.
Okay.
But Tim Drummond, I've known him since I was a little kid. He's been around, and so.
Okay, so you were a little more comfortable in that situation than if you're going in not knowing anybody.
I suppose. And, having been on the road with my brother, I also knew the crew very well.
Yeah.
Like I knew Tim Mulligan, and I knew David Briggs and all of his other road guys and stuff like that. So that was, there was a level of comfort there too, because I knew that these people they're like family to me. So I certainly didn't feel like I was being judged or anything like that. And even though I was I had a little bit of imposter syndrome there.
Oh, really?
I'm very lucky to have had Nicolette, because she really kind of took me under her wing, and she told me, she told me the truth about things and what it was all about. And she encouraged me a lot. I've had a lot of people in my life that have done that for me musically, when I didn't think that I was really up to the task, and not just within that too. I play keyboards too, and I know a lot of people that are much better players than I am, but these are the same people that will stand up and push me to do things that I didn't think that I could do. Send me out on auditions, just, here, take my gear, go, get the gig, right?
Wow.
Oh yeah. I've been
great.
really lucky like that. And I think if you don't push yourself, you'll never know if you can do it or not. Like, I've made a complete fool of myself on more than one occasion, but after you've done that once or twice, you're really not afraid to do it again.
Yeah, that's for sure. So this pushing yourself, was that how you started the Brainflower album? Because I'll be damned if I can find that album.
Oh, well, it never got released, and
Okay.
I can send you some tracks. I'm actually working on reviving that repertoire, actually.
Oh, cool.
And I'm probably going to do a film of it. The place that I was recording last night is a theater, and I was just talking to the owner about that, because he's all wired up with cameras and great microphones and beautiful piano and stuff like that.
Oh,
so
nice.
What happened around that time is that I, of course, had been in rock bands, and every time I did a little demo, of course, that's what we used to call them back in the day, demos and on cassettes, so every time I do a new demo, I'd send it out to the usual suspects in our world. And so I get this phone call one day from Lenny Warnaker at Warner Brothers.
Yeah.
And he says, I got your demo tape. He says, I really like your voice and your songs are okay, but he says, I just don't think I think it's going to get lost in the shuffle. There's too much out there that actually kind of sounds like this, and it just doesn't stand out for me. And at that point, I was having a major situation with my band. I was just so sick of dealing with guitar players and having volume wars in rehearsal and stuff like that. So I was just ready to bag the whole thing. And he just caught me at that moment where I said, you know what? I said, I'm done with rock bands. I'm going to just play piano, play with a string quartet, and maybe go play in some coffee houses or something like that,
Yeah.
And he said, well, that sounds really interesting. Let me know if you want to do some recording, because I'd be really interested in that. And I went, yeah, okay, bye. And I hung up. And about 2 weeks later, I'm sitting in the dentist's office, just waiting, things going through my mind. And it's like, hey, wait a minute. Did he offer me a recording deal or something? And so I got up and I ran down the hall to the payphone, and I called his office, and his assistant picks up the phone, and she said, "Oh, Astrid, I hear you're going to be doing some recording with us." And I was just like, based on an idea. And this is not the first time that this has happened to me. Okay, so they put me in the studio, and unfortunately, Lenny Warnaker left Warner's to go to DreamWorks, to go start DreamWorks. So kind of get left high and dry. But you've never lived as a musician unless you've been kicked in the head a couple of times. So
yeah.
So yeah, that was one of the first times I had to kind of, and honestly, the idea wasn't fully developed, but I found a great arranger, a composer, this guy named Bob Parr, who I worked with, and he and I did some beautiful, beautiful work together. And I will share it with you, because it's really, really gorgeous stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And
putting love in its place, holding the answer to then. Down this road, I'll find the reason. Down this road, time changes season, and I'm nothing if not freezing down this road.
although there are things about it that are not perfect and stuff like that. And I wouldn't really want to revisit the recording because it was too complicated.
Okay.
I think probably it would benefit from a live performance. And I did a few live performances of it back then too. At one point I had just myself playing piano. I had another piano player, a drummer, a percussionist, 2 background singers, a string quartet, a bass player, who was also the conductor.
Wow.
And there was something else. You're a saxophone player, a sax player, yeah.
Oh, wow.
So I know.
That's quite the group there. My gosh.
It was. Oh, it was fantastic. It was great fun. I mean, it's like rock band times 100, you know, because you've got more people and you got more going on, and just like the alchemy of like making it all happen. And of course, there's always the chance that it's all going to turn into a big train wreck at any moment. So there's that too, right?
That's always exciting. That's what I love.
That is.
So, all right. So, and at this point, I see that you do some background vocals on Nancy Wilson's Live at McCabe's album. How did you meet Nancy, and what have you worked on with her?
Okay, so I met Nancy when we were touring with Booker T and the MGs, and we were in Ireland. We played at Slane Castle in Ireland, and there a lot of like Nancy and Cameron Crowe and Johnny Depp, and God, there's tons of people that were there that just like happened, I guess, to be in Dublin at the same time. So they all came to the show. Anyway, that's the first time I met Nancy. I had known Cameron from before because he was a friend of Larry Johnson, who has, you know, worked with Neil for many, many years.
Right.
And so I knew Cameron from way back in the day, like before, you know, probably around like Fast Times at Ridgemont High era.
Oh, wow.
So,
okay.
So we started chatting. He introduced me to Nancy. We hit it off. We kept in touch. We hung out together in Los Angeles. Turns out we have some mutual friends in recording studios and stuff like that. And this little place that she was doing some demos at was owned by a friend of mine. And, you know, one thing led to another. And yeah, she asked me to sing on that thing, which is really cool. But I had done, can't remember this before or after, but I sang backup for Ann and Nancy at the Bridge School one year.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Yeah, that was fun. And you want to talk about performance anxiety? Okay, it's like there is nothing more frightening than standing next to Ann Wilson while she's singing.
That's got to be incredible.
It really was. But honestly, it's like we rehearsed, and it was like real casual, and like you know, I got the tracks beforehand, so I knew the parts. So we're rehearsing in the hotel room, and that's all cool. But then you go out on stage, and it's like, first of all, they put Nancy like way on the other side of the stage to me. So she's like 30 feet away. It's like, where's my friend?
My buddy.
You know? And Ann's standing next to me. And as soon as she opens her mouth to sing, it's just like every single hair on my body stood up. And it's like, like that, you know? And not only that, it's at Mountain View at the Shoreline Amphitheater there. And I played a lot of amphitheaters before, but this one's really weird because for some reason, you can see like the first 20 rows. It's like they're right in your face.
Oh,
they're
really?
Right there. So here I am standing out front. Anne's like making me want to melt into a puddle of, you know, something.
Right.
So, but I got through it, but it's really funny because like, I think the last song that we did, we all ended on this, you know, 3 or 4 part harmony, and I had a modulated note, and I was just so in the moment that I forgot to, you know, go down to the other note. We're all holding the note and they're all looking at me like, like, oh yeah. Okay.
Oh, man. Well, you know, sometimes you just get caught up in it. Man.
It's really easy to do that. You know, because and I found that on the road too. It's just like, you can't get distracted by shit that's going on around you. You really just got to focus on what you're doing. Because if you start looking at the audience, or if you start letting your mind wander or something like that, you're going to miss things that are going by. You know, like in the case of working with my brother, it's like, if you miss, you know, if he turns around and looks at me, like we have kind of like this telepathy thing going on when we're on stage. I know what he's thinking and I know where he wants me to go. Like if he turns around and looks at me and does something. I can't explain it. It's a sibling thing, I think.
Oh yeah.
But so you can't miss any of those cues, or else you're kind of screwed, right?
Yeah.
So I've found myself in situations where I get hung up on watching what's going on in the crowd. And Slane Castle was actually a really good example, because there was so much going on in the first few rows. It's like this festival, right?
Okay.
And everybody's just like crammed in like they are at a festival. There's no seating. It's just like on this hill, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they've got them all crammed in together. And there's people like crowd surfing, and the security people are pulling them out of the crowd, like, and pulling them behind the barrier so they could run back out. You know how it goes, right?
Oh yeah.
So, but then you'd see somebody kind of crowd surfing, and then they disappear below the level of the crowd, and you go, oh my God, what happened to that person? And then I forgot to sing a couple of times, you know?
Right.
So I figured out very quickly, it's just like, do not look at the crowd, right? So I'm just kind of looking up at the sky, which looks like it's about to start pouring rain any second, but at least,
geez.
you know, I had something to focus on that wasn't too terribly distracting.
I can only imagine how difficult it's got to be to approach that as not a fan, as, you know, I'm doing a job, instead of sitting there going, I've got the best seat in the house.
Trust me, it's pretty cool. You know, and there's other things happening on stage too that's very distracting too. Like, I love watching Booker T play.
Oh.
He's just so I don't know, it's almost hypnotic watching him play, because he just kind of looks up and he's grooving. He's not even looking at what he's doing. And he's reaching out and he's pulling the stops, and his feet are going, and he's looking around, smiling. Yeah. You know, and it just constantly amazes me how natural it is for him. And it's funny, because when I see other B3 players trying to play like him, it's just like, nah, you're not getting it.
Yeah.
You're not quite there, man.
It's only one Booker T.
Yeah, that's for sure. That's for sure.
So you also released a couple things after Brainflower. So I wanted to find out a little bit about, and I don't know if I'm saying this right. Is it IST? Or is it the word? Is it like
Ist.
an Ist? Okay.
Ist,
I wasn't 100% sure. So that album is awesome.
Yeah,
It's
it is.
so heavy. I love it.
I know. Thank you. I love it too.
How did that come together? Was that a project that you put together, or was it just something that you found?
Well, what happened was I moved back to, my dad was not doing so well. He had a stroke, and he's kind of slipping into dementia. But at that time this is like late 90s, and he was doing pretty good, but I just really wanted to come back and hang out with him. But it was the first time I'd been back in Toronto for, you know, probably almost 20 years. And I did not want to draw attention to myself, but I still wanted to play. And so I performed under the name Ist, just as a solo. And I knew enough club owners at the time that would let me get away with it, which was kind of nice. And in some of these shows, I actually met some people, some other players, Dave Kiner and a guy named Dan Cornelius, who basically loved what I was doing. And then we got together and we started practicing. So Ist is really, it's just kind of an AKA for me.
Okay.
And since the band doesn't really exist anymore, I'm probably going to change it to Astrid Young and Ist, or Astrid Young's Ist, or something like that.
Oh, okay.
I haven't really decided yet, but it was a great band. It started out as a 4-piece actually. And I was playing 12-string, and we had a bass player, and then Dan playing drums and Dave Kiner playing guitar. But our bass player also worked in film production. So he missed a lot of rehearsals, and he missed a few gigs. And we ended up playing a couple of gigs without a bass player, which was fine. But, you know, one night I just decided, it's like, I think I'm going to play bass tonight. So I called up my friend Lori Green, who was in a band called Jane Doe at the time. And I said, hey, Lori, can I borrow your bass rig and a bass? Because I think I'm going to play bass tonight at my gig. And she's going, have you ever played bass before? I said, yeah, a little bit, you know.
Yeah.
I don't see the problem. So she said, okay, so she brought her gear down to the club and I set it up and we played as a 3-piece that night for the first time. And it was so tight and so heavy and so locked in. We all just kind of looked at each other and went, I guess we're a power trio,
Well.
And then poor Dave Delorier called us up this is the bass player, about a week later. And he says, so when's the next rehearsal? And it's like, hate to break it to you, dude.
Sorry.
But that was, that was an interesting exercise too, because we'd really never rehearsed with me as a bass player, and I just decided to dive in and do it. And wow. It could have gone really badly, but it didn't.
It's amazingly heavy, and I guess I wasn't expecting it to be as heavy as it was. It's got a great stoner rock grungy feel to it, and it's 16 millimeter is I think that might be my favorite track off that album. It is so heavy. I love this album.
In the silence of another scene, all the voices in her head went crazy. Picture perfect posturing, scenic background lingering but hazy. Hey.
Oh, thank you. Well, I had written a lot of these songs, and not Bleed actually kind of wrote the music for that, but 16mm, and there was a bunch of other songs on that record that I was actually already doing in my solo shows. And so I wrote them on 12 string and I played them just like that. So we kind of translated it to like a band situation. So, and I actually made another record called Matinee that a lot of the same songs that are on the Ist record are on Matinee.
I wanted to ask you about that. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and that's another interesting story because I got through Billy Talbot, actually. Billy had a record company in the Netherlands that was going to release one of his solo records. Oh. And he said, do you want me to send them your record and see what they say? So they offered to put out the Ist record, which I thought was great. But then we booked this tour. Neil booked this tour in Europe. We did did a few festivals, and then we were going to do this 3-day stint at Brixton Academy, and Jonathan Demme was going to film it and all that stuff. But anyway, the whole thing ended up getting cut short. But even if we had finished the little run of dates there, it would have meant that I was only in Europe and the UK for 10 days. And I thought, well, that kind of sucks, go all the way over there and only be there for 10 days. So I was running a wine shop in Napa Valley at the time, and it was a slow day. And I just had this crazy idea, and I called up my record label in the Netherlands and I said, hey, so if I gave you an acoustic record, would you book me some shows and put my record out? And to my surprise, he said yes. So I was like, okay, well, I guess now I got to go make a record.
Yeah. So some of those songs are on the Ist record, but some aren't. So 16mm is my favorite off of Ist, but I think I actually like the Matinee version even better.
Of another scene, all the voices in her head went crazy. The picture perfect posturing, the scenic background lingering but hazy.
And then Restraint is so cool because that, to me, that kind of sounds like Alice in Chains but with a flute.
Yeah. Well, that's actually it's not a flute, it's a mellotron, I think.
Oh, cool. That's even better.
Yeah. I played mellotron, and it's a really cool one too. And apparently it's a famous one. I'm not really sure who owned it before, but anyway, so the mellotron, and then I also had a mini Moog that I played on it too, which is fantastic.
That is cool. Those things are amazing.
Your eyes have been haunting me.
So 2002 was pretty busy for you. So you had those two. You worked with Neil on Are You Passionate? When did you start writing? Because around that time you also were writing a screenplay that kind of became a short movie, right?
Yeah. Okay. So that particular story, which I started writing in 1986, 85, 86. Yeah. It was just an idea that I had, and it started as a short story. And then it kind of grew into, actually, I was working in a bar, and these guys from a film production company used to come in there all the time. And I would overhear them talking about buying scripts and buying, synopses and just stockpiling ideas and stuff like that. And I said, hey, I got a couple of great ideas. And so I pitched them. I just gave them an elevator pitch on it. And they said, right. Yeah, that's great. So I wrote up a 1-page or a 2-page synopsis, and they bought it, which was pretty cool. Oh, wow. Never got made, of course. And then a few years later, I decided to bite the bullet and actually write the screenplay, which I did. And I got a couple of good hits on that, but I was pretty green at the time, and I didn't really pursue the avenues that I had available to me. I should have, but I had other things going on, so I wasn't paying attention. Anyway, so I wrote a number of screenplays, but that one seemed to keep popping up here and there. When I moved back to Toronto, this is around the same time I started Ist. So I had this screenplay, and I thought, I got to get this damn thing made, So I did a little bit of research, and I found this director, this Canadian director, who I'm not going to say is known for his high quality output, but he's definitely known for interesting genre stuff, and the fact that he had actually finished a lot of movies, which says a lot to me. I mean, the artist world is there's a lot of talk, and a lot of people don't actually finish their projects, right? I'm more of a doer. If I have an idea, I can see the end. I have the end in sight, So whenever I start something, that's the intention, is to actually finish it and have something tangible at the end. Right. So this guy, his name is Julian Grant. I read about him in the newspaper and looked at his bio and stuff like that. And he finished 18 feature films or something like that. And I thought, wow, a lot of them TV stuff and festival stuff, but still, that's a huge feat in itself, right? Oh, sure. So he was programming this, the Fantasia Festival in Toronto at the Bloor Theatre. The Fantasia Festival is fantasy and horror and a lot of Asian cinema, and some of it pretty extreme stuff too. So it's very, it's very nerdy. Yeah. But I went down there and I thought, okay, so because he had this movie with Steve Guttenberg in it, which was, he was screening that, and I thought, well, based on whatever I think of this movie, maybe I'll pitch him on my script. So I sat through the movie. And while it wasn't, any epic piece of cinema, I could see how he made a lot out of what he had to work with. And I thought, this could work, right? So at the end, he's there with his little crowd of fanboys around him and stuff like that. And I just kind of waited for my moment and walked up to him, gave him my elevator pitch. I just kind of went, I'm Astrid Young and blah, 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 blah. Here's my script, right? And he took the script and he said, oh, okay. He says, well, I'll give it a look and I'll give you a call. Oh, okay, fine. So I walked away and I'm thinking, that's probably going in the round file. But he called me. He called me about a week later, and we got together and pooled our resources, which was basically nothing. and he thought he would be able to get funding, but nobody was biting. And this was pre 9/11. And I think most production companies and studios were looking for romantic comedies and lighter stuff. And this is, it's about a serial killer, basically. A serial killer who's a rock star, though. So it's, and a woman, too. Oh, that's awesome. But here's the thing, and I knew this from a Hollywood perspective. It's if you want to sell a screenplay, you don't write it with a woman lead. Now, I believe that that's changed quite a bit because but back then they didn't consider it possible for a woman to open a film, right? To be the big draw. Yeah. So I had a lot of strikes going against me, but I figured, well, we're in the indie realm, right? So what can it hurt? anyway, he couldn't get money for it. He couldn't get any bites on it at all. So he said, I still want to make this. So let's rewrite it as a short documentary style movie that's following the events of the film, of the screenplay, right? So basically a rock you shockumentary, a mock you rock you shockumentary.
Oh, you started a whole new genre.
Because we had no money, I ended up playing the lead character, which I had never intended to do. And my band was in it, and my music was in it, and a lot of my friends were in it too. And we just like basically pulled it together on a shoestring. You know, I think all told, the whole thing maybe cost $60,000. But in the end, just to make a long story short, I really wasn't happy with the finished product. Julian ended up getting, he got contracted for a bunch of movies of the week and, you know, Lifetime Channel or something like that, or I can't remember. I think he did a bunch of like Terminator TV shows or something.
Oh, yeah.
Or RoboCop. That's what it was, RoboCop.
Oh, okay.
So he basically, and to complicate matters, I was sick. I just found out I had cancer too. So I wasn't really in any physical shape to kind of stand up for myself and watch over the project. So he basically slapped it together like a house of cards, and I was never happy with it. You couldn't even. So we did still get into festivals, and he actually did sell it for broadcast, but I never got any money for it, and he kind of screwed me over on a lot of levels. And I wanted to go back and fix it, like, because we had shot so much that he didn't use. And he told me that he didn't know what happened to the footage, which I think is bullshit. Yeah. And he said he didn't want to revisit it at all. And it's just like, from my standpoint, it's like, this could be good, and it could actually have some legs if it was fixed, but he had no interest in fixing it, even if I was doing the work.
Oh, geez.
So I basically just like kind of written it off. Although the music video for Bleed is quite good. You can look that up on YouTube.
Yeah.
That's part of the movie.
This movie, was it banned in 4 countries?
Yeah.
Why was it banned in 4 countries?
Well, there's a scene in the music video that is it's highly offensive. It's really bad. I mean, literally, when we showed it in the theater, and we had a full theater too, I sat in the very back row. And when that particular scene came up, I counted the number of people that ran out of the theater, mostly women. Yeah. But probably about 20, 25 people like ran out of the theater. Wow. Couldn't get out of there fast enough. Oh my God. My. Yeah. So, you know, without giving it away too much, it was not a scene that we shot. It was footage from another short film that we got the rights to.
Oh, wow. Okay.
The filmmaker is German, I think. I'm not sure. I can't remember who it is. Anyway.
Now, you've done some other really interesting things that would give me performance anxiety, like the song you did with Johnny Cash on Ben Keith's Christmas album. I know sometimes things are kind of pieced together, recordings from different locations and times. Did you actually work directly with Johnny on that one?
No.
Okay.
We were in the same studio on the same day, but I didn't actually sing with him.
Oh, okay.
So it's just, you know, Ben was working on that record while we were doing Harvest Moon. So it was one of those things that is like, you know, they'd take a couple of days off from Harvest Moon and Ben would work on his Christmas record. So,
oh, wow. And then you did a really cool David Bowie cover on the Spiders from Venus album.
Oh.
I catch a paper boy, but things don't really change. Still lying in the rain, but I never wave bye-bye. But I try.
I really like that version of Modern Love. Was that something that you got to pick, or was that assigned to you? How does that work?
No, I was doing that song already. And, you know, it's funny. I tell people all the time that Modern Love is actually a very, very sad song.
Yeah.
and so it's like my version of it. I think I came up with the arrangement. It was like 2 a.m. in Toronto, midsummer on Queen Street. I was staying at a friend's place. It was so hot. There was no air conditioning. The bars were just getting out on the street. It was just like mayhem outside, and there was no peace inside because I couldn't close the windows because it was too hot. And so that's what came out of that. But it's interesting that you mentioned that song, because all of the reviews that record got, every single one mentioned that song, and it was very polarizing. They either absolutely loved it and thought I was a genius, or they thought it was the worst piece of crap that they've ever heard.
Really?
And that I should be, it's like I should be exiled for eternity because I defaced this song so badly,
Jeez. Well, I'm in the I love it camp.
Oh, thank you. I'm probably going to have another go at it at some point. I mean, I recorded it in a friend of mine's studio, but I think I would do it a little bit differently this time. It's, I often do it in shows because it still surprises people. They don't even recognize the song until the chorus comes up.
Oh, yeah.
And then afterwards they're going, oh my God, I didn't even know that was that song. I will never hear that song the same way again.
Exactly. If I didn't pull up specifically knowing it was on the Bowie album, I wouldn't have. It would have taken me until the chorus probably to figure out. Oh, that's the Bowie song. So your latest album, which I've been listening to a lot over the past week or so, One Night at Giant Rock. You did that with Victor DiLorenzo.
Yes.
From the Violent Femmes. How did you meet up with him and get this album going?
Well, I played bass on this record for a band called Overhaul, which is a UK band.
Okay.
And the guy, I think his name's Andy Gallagher, and he's done some work with Victor in the past. And so Victor and his manager at the time knew about me from playing on his record. And I guess Victor was looking for somebody to work with. And we just happened to be in the same city at the same time. My husband was playing, we were in Buffalo, and my husband was playing a bar with his band. And Victor was actually doing some sort of a lecture at the university there.
Okay.
At SUNY. So his manager arranged for us to have dinner together and do a little meet and greet. And we hit it off. And then from there, we just started talking about how we could work together and what we were going to do. And I had already been working on One Night at Giant Rock. I already had a few songs that were like in various stages of completion, but he kind of wanted to start from scratch. But I thought, well, this is a good place to start because some of these songs are really good, like Patchouli Boy and The Nerve, and what else had I already started? Integratron was already recorded, and
cool.
There were a couple of other things too. So we started with that as a core, but then when we got in the studio, we just started writing new stuff and coming up with new things, and he really pushed me to do things that I never would have done on my own. It was a absolutely enlightening, fantastic experience, but it was really intense because, this is the first time I've ever actually given my stuff over to a producer before.
Oh, really?
And, I have severe hearing loss. So it's not that I can't hear anything, but there's the tonality of things I can't hear anymore. So, even though I kind of had a death grip on my own music for most of my life, I'm in a position right now where I don't really trust myself to mix anymore because I just don't have that reference anymore. I can't tell whether things are good or bad. I can tell whether things are out of tune and I can tell whether the tone's good, but in terms of balancing things and getting that right, it's like, I just can't do it. So it was really hard for me to kind of give that up. Because I had to really find somebody that I could trust. And I thought, well, I'm just going to have to let it go and trust this person because A, he's brilliant. And B, this is like the chance of a lifetime for me to work with, somebody that I really admire, artistically and as a person. And C, it's like, hey, let's try something new,
Yeah.
So we would be in the studio and he would like stop me and say, okay, so the next take we're going to do, why don't you try it this way? And I just kind of like, you know, my brain would be going, what are you, crazy? I would never do that. And then the other part of my brain saying, let it go, just do it. You got nothing to lose, right?
Yeah.
So I would do that. I'd like just take a deep breath and do it. And it was just brilliant. It was absolutely brilliant. And the engineer, Travis Kasperbauer, said after the first couple of days, he goes, you know, I know what you're doing. And I said, what do you mean? And he says, I see the look on your face when he tells you to do things. And I know that you don't agree with him, but you do it anyway. And he says, you are kicking ass.
Nice.
So it was a real revelation to me, like to be able to let it go and to have something come back that was so special, that was so incredibly special. Like that record is, it's, you know, not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but there's so much heart in it and there's so much soul and there's so much atmosphere. And a lot of it has to do with Victor, you know?
Well, I love all the varied styles on the album. It's amazing. I mean, Integratron, it's got this super awesome desert vibe to it. And then you go completely 180 with Try This, and you got that awesome sax on it, which sounds like Dana Colley playing the sax, who's like my favorite sax player. And
yeah, Darcy Hepner, he's amazing.
Oh, he's now right up there with Dana Colley for me.
Yeah, Hamilton on.
Then you've got Your New Drug.
Are you high in your new drug? Are you seeing things so clear? And if you really gotta go, why don't you leave your body here?
That and Amy's song are my two favorites on the album. And it's...
Aw, thank you.
Your New Drug is just got this very slinky, sexy sound to it. And I mean, your voice sounds like Karen Carpenter on it, who another person...
That's funny. You're not the only person that said that.
Oh, really?
Karen Carpenter on acid.
Yeah.
That's what I got. My favorite.
That's awesome. I didn't think of the acid part. Man, see, one of these days I'm going to get this podcasting thing right. But I love that it ends on Amy's song. It's just such a beautiful song.
Yeah, it's epic. It really is. There's a lot going on in there, and
yeah,
beautiful piano track too. As a matter of fact, I have a version of that that's just piano and vocal, and it's just absolutely unbelievable.
Wow.
Probably release that at some point soon.
Oh, that'd be great. So what are you working on now? Yeah, I know in the past you'd mentioned that you're working on redoing a few things, some of the music, also redoing a bit of the book that you released, Being Young.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So, I just got the rights reverted back to me for Being Young. It's actually out of print, but the publisher is going out of business. So everything came back to me. So I have an opportunity they technically owed me a mass market paperback. So I was prepared to do a revision on it anyway. But now that it's completely within my control, I want to do something that is a little bit more boundary pushing. And I've actually talked to my brother about being involved, both my brothers about being involved in it too, because, to get their angle on certain aspects of our relationship with our father and to be able to kind of juxtapose it, because we had very similar experiences, although similar but different, I mean, basically the same thing happened to all of us, but we all handled it in different ways. And a lot of it has to do with my dad. Like, we don't have the same mother.
Right.
So my dad left their mother for my mom. And then eventually he left my mom for another woman.
Oh, wow.
But it all kind of happened. Me and Neil were about the same age when it happened to us. Right.
Oh, wow.
And so when my dad split up with their mom, Neil went with his mom to Winnipeg, and Bob, my oldest brother, stayed with my dad in Toronto, and Dad tried to take him under his wing and turn him into a writer. And I think, I can't imagine I mean, we're always looking for our parents' approval.
Yeah.
I can't imagine that was easy,
Yeah. Oh God, no.
for Neil. Although, when I look at my experience, my mother was an alcoholic, and there was some mental health issues there, and she really did not want me to be a musician. I mean, it was like her worst nightmare that I decided to take that on as a profession,
Wow.
And she never really got music. She was never really into it. But the difference between me and Neil is that his mother was so behind him. She was so encouraging. And she would call into the radio station anonymously and said, hey, if you're, like go on the air saying, to go see his band.
Oh, wow.
And, oh yeah.
Man.
It's, and I hear stories about her and I think, wow, I wonder what would have happened to me if my mother was like, got behind me like that. I mean, no regrets or anything. And I don't blame my parents for anything that they did, but it's really interesting to see where we ended up with similar circumstances. And we're very much alike in so many ways, like the, nature versus nurture thing. I mean, the nature thing is very, very strong with us all. So,
Wow. Getting that perspective in the book, that would be amazing. That'd be a fascinating read.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's a good book anyway. It's funny when I got the print copies back from the publisher and I just started skimming through it and it's just like, hey, this is pretty good. It's good stuff,
Yeah.
So, it can only get better. And I think I'm a little braver now too. I'm not as afraid of talking about, like, I don't really feel that there's a reason that I should lie. I mean, I would rather just omit things than lie about it. Right.
Yeah.
So if I'm going to talk about something, even if it hurts, I'm going to do it. Right.
Makes sense. Yeah.
And there's a lot of things that I don't talk about in the book that I think I could probably fill in a lot of the between the lines aspects of it with the new version.
Throughout this, you've mentioned new music that you're working on. So what's coming down the pike? What can we hopefully expect from you in the future? Hopefully the near future.
Well, a couple of things. I mean, one thing is just a kind of a mutual project I'm working on with a few friends of mine. I have a very dear friend in Los Angeles who's going through chemotherapy for pancreatic cancer right now.
Oh,
and
wow.
he's a brilliant songwriter, and he's written a lot of songs with a lot of people. And me and about 26 other people have all chosen songs of his to cover.
Oh, wow.
And another mutual friend of ours is putting it together as a record for him. And so that's what I've been most recently working on, but I just sent the tracks off today. So that's kind of my part of that is over.
Okay.
And eventually, once we can travel again, I have every intention of me and Victor and I definitely intend to work together again. So
Awesome.
that'll be coming up. I mean, there was a couple of songs that we cut that never made it to the record. And then I've got a couple of other things going on too.
Okay.
And I've been playing a lot of piano the past couple of years, and I've written some new songs. And one thing I was working on pre-COVID was I was going to do some live broadcasts from my house with a string player that I work with named Saskia Tompkins. She plays violin, viola, and nickel harpa. And we were kind of working up some of my old Brainflower repertoire and some new stuff. And we were going to do these live broadcasts. And then COVID hit. So our rehearsal schedule kind of went down the toilet. And then everybody started doing these live streaming things. And I thought, it's kind of half-assed, a lot of it. I mean, God bless everybody that's doing it. And, you got to keep it going. But I want to do something epic,
Okay.
And, my idea of epic is sometimes more than I can afford, unfortunately. But there's a local theater here that has a really good setup. And I was just talking to the owner last night about going in and doing the shows there. And he said, well, you could either stream it or you could like film it and stop and start. And that way you can get like perfect takes and stuff. And I think that's what I'm going to do.
Oh,
so
cool.
We'll make a film of these songs. There's probably about maybe 15 songs or something like that. And then put together a little film around it and, probably call it Brainflower because honestly, that whole situation never really came to fruition. So might as well, it's not like I'm rehashing shit that everybody's heard before. This is going to be new to everybody.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, before I let you go, you mentioned in our correspondence before this, a performance anxiety story about your guitar player having a meltdown on set at one point.
Oh, yeah, that was on the movie. The Dave Kiner, who is in Ist, of course, you know, the band was in the film, and there's a couple of real Spinal Tap moments about this because honestly, you know, I mean, anyway, I'll get into that later. But anyway, so Kiner, who is a bit of a loudmouth anyway, and he's like, we're filming at Metalworks Studios in Toronto, Mississauga, actually. It's a beautiful studio. And so he's got a scene that he's supposed to be doing. He's got one line that he's supposed to do, that he's supposed to be standing there in the kitchenette making a cup of tea. And he's like saying to the camera, I'm going to show you how to make my special herbal tea or something like that, you know?
Okay.
That's all he had to say. But he went out on the loading dock and he smoked a bunch of weed with another guy who was playing my engineer, Bill. Okay. And they got like completely wasted out of it. And he locked himself in the control room because he had like the fear, you know, the marijuana induced fear.
Right.
And he wouldn't come out. So Julian finally had to go in there. Julian talked him into letting him in there. And he sat there with him for like 20 minutes and kind of talked him down and got him to come out and do something. But afterwards he's going, well, you know, I'm not an actor. I'm a musician. This is not my thing. And I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I want to do this, you know, and stuff like that. And he was just like so freaked out about it. But ironically, okay, so by the end of the whole thing, like after we'd done the music video and we were just doing some pickup shots at the end, by that point, he had pretty much lost the fear. Right. And you couldn't shut him up. I mean, you just like turn the camera on and he would just go. Right. Okay. And ironically, he's become a movie extra. And I've seen him in a lot of stuff, you know, and I'm thinking, here's the guy that said he couldn't do it. This is not his thing. He's a musician. He's not an actor and stuff like that. And I thought, oh, yeah.
There we go.
Whatever.
That's fantastic. Astrid, thank you so much for spending so much time with me.
My pleasure.
Where can people follow you and find the new releases, keep up with what you're doing, the social media, websites? I'm redoing my website, so I hesitate to give that out right now because I gotta blow the whole thing up. But it'll be, you know, you can just Google Astrid Young and you'll find it. I have plenty of videos on YouTube, including the bleed video from Haunted, from the movie, which is it's pretty crazy. I sent you the movie picture. Yes. The movie poster. And yeah, I am covered in blood. Yeah. I'm literally covered in blood by the end of it. And it looks so real. It looks incredibly real. Like I'm lying on this white cyclorama, just covered in blood, right? Wow. It's pretty cool. And and then there's a bunch of other videos that I made there. And as far as my music, I mean, you can find it on any streaming service, Spotify, iHeartRadio, iTunes, Apple Music, you know, wherever you get your music, I'm there. So, and Ist too. Do seek out Ist. The record's called Pakalolo Paniolo. You won't find it under my name because it's under Ist, I-S-T. But there's also, just to confuse matters, there's another band called Ist from the UK, which is not me, right? So I think it's easier probably to search Pakalolo Paniolo, and then you'll find it because it's also on all the streaming services. What does that mean? What is there? Marijuana cowboy. Oh, there we go. Okay. Well, you know, we're a stoner band, right? And we're trying to figure out what to call the record. And I thought, well, you know, if we're stoner, right, we have to embrace something. So I might as well embrace the weed. Plus, it's really fun to say. Oh, thank you so much. This has been so much fun. I really do appreciate you spending all this time with me. My pleasure. My pleasure. And also I should say, you can find me on Instagram at Wanda Plez. You know, you probably search my name, you'll come up for that, but it's under Wanda Plez. And the meaning behind that is Wanda. My first name is Vendela. And if you anglicize that, it's Wanda. So that's part of that. Me and Neil call each other by our other names. Sometimes his middle name is Percival. So yeah,
He's Percy and I'm Wanda.
Oh, man.
And Plez is actually the name of the character in my movie.
Right.
In the movie Haunted. So.
Right.
Yeah. Wanda Plez. That's me.
Well, it's funny. A former guest on the podcast who's become a friend. Her name's Autumn Whitaker. She's in a band called the Hawk Percival, and she named it after Neil's middle name. So.
Well, the interesting thing is he's named after our grandfather. And our grandfather's name wasn't Percival, it was Percy. Just straight up Percy.
They formalized his name.
Yeah, exactly.
Man.
I love it when it freezes when you've got like this big smile on your face. It looks great.
It's better than it's better than that face.
Well, the other times you looked worried, like.
Thank you so much. I promise I'll let you have your evening now.
Absolutely, my pleasure. Thank you so much.
Remember when the valley used to be a valley before the tide came in? Malibu is our Atlantis now, and those that remain had to ride a big wave. Funny how we never thought dying young or getting caught. Life was pretty good, but it's so much better now. At the shoreline,